passed through the midst of them and went away. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
I remember as a young child making long road trips with my parents across country for vacation. And one of the fun activities that we had while we were in the car was look out the window with great anticipation of the Burma Shave signs and billboards and messages along the roadside. Now, some of you that are my age or older, you probably remember those road signs. They were referred to as the verse by the side of the road. And these messages would extend for miles upon miles in riddle, rhyme, and jingle form. One of my favorites was, "Don't pass cars on curves or hills. If cops don't get you, the morticians will. Burma Shave." Pretty good advice to live by, I think. You know, messages, they can come to us in many different ways and with great different creativity. With modern digital communication, messages can be instantaneous, allowing more voices and messages to be heard by more people than at any other time in our history. Sometimes these messages are positive, uplifting, and inspiring. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's so many voices and messages that we can get overwhelmed, preventing us from hearing voices that speak to us on behalf of God. Voices that beckon us, you and me, to be God's prophet, his voice, his messenger in the world. In our gospel passage today, the people from Jesus' hometown didn't have to contend with the Burma Shave message billboards or digital media. However, they did have difficulty discerning and understanding the prophetic voice of Jesus. They were hostile to the message from a native son, a regular kind of guy, the son of Joseph, the carpenter. And Jesus dared them with a message that he was sent not just to Israel, but to all the nations, and most especially the oppressed, the poor, and the marginalized. We too have modern prophetic voices that bring to us God's messages, voices that challenge our attitudes, our biases, and the comforts of our lives. Two that immediately come to my mind that you're probably familiar with are St. Teresa of Calcutta, who cared for the poorest of the poor, and Dr. Martin Luther King, who challenged our attitudes on social justice. Both were prophetic voices with messages rooted in the love of God and in the love of neighbor, calling us to live out our Christian values. I'm convinced that we don't need to look far to find modern-day prophets among us who are called to be God's messengers. Just take a moment and look at the person to your left, and then look to the person on your right. Through our baptism, each one of us is anointed as Jesus was anointed priest, prophet, and king, sharers in his mission of salvation to the world, strengthened by confirmation and nourished each week by the gift of the Eucharist. Regular, ordinary people, you and me, are called to give witness to God's love in the world. It can be a difficult task, And yes, we may be rejected like Jesus. And you know, we don't need to do great things like St. Teresa or Dr. King, just small things. Perhaps we can overcome the social pressures at school by sitting with a lonely classmate at the lunch table who everyone is making fun of. Maybe as a parent, we can catch our children doing something good and something positive and praise them. Perhaps it's a message of encouragement for a coworker who's struggling at work. Maybe we can be the voice that defends the unborn or marriage and family values. We can be God's messenger of hope and love when we visit the sick, the elderly, or the dying. The possibilities are endless, but the need is great. Prophetic voices, they're all around us. They speak to us through Scripture, in prayer, through friends, co-workers, and even family members. We just need to quiet the distractions in our life, turn off our digital media communication devices, and listen with an open heart. Sometimes prophetic voices and messages can come to us in unexpected ways. It did for me this past week. After nearly 9 years, I finally got the courage to read my dad's parting gift to me before he died. My dad was also a deacon, and he left me 27 years of his homilies, all organized and categorized, a real treasure trove of thoughts and reflections. And I opened the binder to this week's homily, which he delivered 21 years ago. And I could hear his voice in my mind and in my heart. In simple, powerful words, my dad told the story of Sister Pat, who he met in Israel while on pilgrimage with my mother. Several years later, Sister Pat was killed as a missionary in a small African country. Upon her death, the entire country grieved in sorrow. For my dad and for the people of that country, there was a realization that her life was a prophetic witness, a voice from God, his messenger, a life that was measured not in dollars and cents, but in loving service to God and to neighbor. Each of us, through our baptism, are called more than to just hear God's voice, but to be his prophetic voice, his messenger, his voice in our families, our schools, our workplaces, our communities, our neighborhoods. This might be hard. We may be rejected, but God will be with us, guiding us and helping us to endure all things with love. God bless you.